So we're going to go ahead and talk about a couple different things here. The first story we're going to talk about is something of particular interest to me, and I think it's something that people have thought about, and that's, what do blind people dream of? I said on an earlier episode, people who wear glasses all the time, in their dreams, do they wear glasses? I've wondered about that, like, in the dream, are you wearing glasses on your face? And if your glasses aren't on your face in your dream, are your dreams blurry? I wear glasses off and on. Like, I'm starting to wear them more as I get older, but generally I only wear them if I'm going to be doing a lot of reading. Most of the time I don't have my glasses on. But I was wondering about what blind people dream. Now, I will say this to start this off. This will probably get a lot of listeners to just drop the show, but I used to hook up with this blind chick a couple years ago, and she kind of explained it to me. So she has this degenerative eye thing. It started when she was like a teenager, where her field of vision gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. She may eventually end up being completely blind, or it may just stop. It's I used to know the name of it, but it's this thing. So she was explaining it to me one night, and she said, this was so bizarre. So she goes, my field of vision is very limited, but my mind is still processing the visual input as if I still had a normal field of vision. So we're over at my apartment, and my apartment's messy as is, and there was something on the floor, like a wrapper or I don't know, candy bar, something. Not a candy bar, but there was something on the floor. And she said, you see that on the floor? She goes, what I'm seeing right now, she goes, you're just seeing like a little green box sitting on the floor. And then the rest of it is just the wood paneling, the wood floor. She goes, when I look at it, I see the green box sitting on the floor, and I see that green box replicated 100 times in every direction. Because her brain is saying, since it only has this little field of vision, her brain is assuming that obstacle is everywhere. She goes, but if I look a couple feet over where there is no obstacle on the floor, I'll just see wood paneling go on forever and ever. So her brain is trying to process the limited information that it has. And so that's why she kind of has to focus. That's why she can't drive. That's why she kind of has to focus when she's navigating. She had the walking stick and everything like that. But she, you would talk to her, you wouldn't know that she was legally blind. But she had to be very careful. And because it was degenerative, it wasn't like it happened overnight. Like, her brain has learned to cope with this loss of vision. And I will say this too, it was super bizarre. She was super nice and incredibly hot. And she did all this stuff that I don't want to go into because then people could probably identify her better. But she just lived life normally and did all this stuff, and she's an amazing woman. But anyways, she doesn't listen to the podcast, though, so I hold that against her. The point is that the brain will try to figure out how to cope with any obstacle that comes in its way. And that's where we get into the idea of dreaming, because what scientists feel dreams are, is it is a way to do practice runs, especially nightmares. Nightmares, science believes, is a way to do practice runs of tragic and traumatic events. So when these things really do happen, you're prepared for it mentally. It's a theory, but I think it's actually a pretty good theory. Now, of course, we have dreams about dragons and nightmares about like stuff that'll never happen, but it's still your brain just basically putting itself in a traumatic state to prepare itself for something traumatic happening in the future. It's a safety mechanism, basically. So this is where we're going to get into what do blind people dream about. I know that was a bit of a lead up, but I think it's important because we're going to get into what my friend's experience was with her waking vision. You'll see kind of start to play out in the dreams as well. So Danish researchers did a study. It was a very small study. There's only 50 people. They had 11 blind people who were blind from birth, 14 people who became blind after the age of, I think it was 1, and then 25 non-blind people, or seeing people. They had to take surveys on their dreams. They asked questions like, did you see, was it in color? Did you taste, smell, feel pain? What emotions did you have? What type of themes did the stories have? Seeing people had at least one visual dream. Now this was, I think, a 6-week survey. So within the 6 weeks, seeing people on average had at least one visual dream. Usually more, but at least one. The blind from birth had no visual dreams, which is to be expected. They've never seen anything. People who became blind, the older they got since they had become blind, the less likely they would see something. because their brain now is working, being like, there's no visual stimuli coming in, so we don't have to produce visual stimuli in the dreams. What's interesting, and also they had, across the board, across the three groups, they were able to identify themes in their dreams. But one of the weirdest things was that when it came for nightmares, blind people had over triple the amount of nightmares of the seen people. 25% of the blind people said they had a nightmare versus 7% of the seen people who said they had a nightmare. And when they were looking at that, they said this is kind of showing that the brain is going through basically practice runs for reality, because the blind people, their nightmares were things that they worry about. Things that are major obstacles for people who are blind. Things like getting lost. Falling in manholes was a very common nightmare in this group. I've never once worried about falling in a manhole. I've thought about climbing into them and seeing what was down there, but I've never thought like, oh no, what if I'm walking on the street and I fall in a manhole? That's not a problem that I face. Getting hit by a car was a common one because they have to deal with that. Losing their guide dog. So, I mean, these are real threats that blind people face. And so their brain is doing those practices. So if that happens, if they're out walking and their dog runs away, goes chases a squirrel or whatever, their brain will know how to deal with a situation. That immediate panic will start to be quelled because basically this has already happened to them 100 times in their sleep. But even though this is the first time it's ever happened in real life. So, and then there's this quote. I thought this was an interesting quote from this one study. It said, when a blind man is asked if he dreams, the answer is an immediate yes. But if we ask him if he sees anything in the dream, the answer is always doubtful because he does not know what it is to see. Even if there were images and colors in his brain during the dream, how could he recognize them? There is, therefore, no direct way through the dream reports to evaluate the presence of a visual activation in the dream of congenitally blind subjects. So it's weird. They may actually see in their dream, but they don't. People who are blind from birth could never explain it. Their dreams could be full of visual stimuli, but they would never be able to explain it to somebody. And I think this story is interesting. I find it absolutely fascinating because that's almost how we try to talk about like cosmic level things, or there's so much stuff in the world that we don't have the language to explain, not only to ourselves, but to other people. I find that fascinating. I find everything with the human brain fascinating because it's not just like, oh, I'm blind, but everything else is normal. Like their brain still is processing all that information, and the brain, if just their eyes are blind, their brain is still able to receive visual stimuli. It's just not getting there. So what's that part of the brain doing? Is it creating its own? How would you define a color to someone who's never seen the color red? I find all that stuff fascinating. It's all philosophical arguments at a certain point, but these people are living that philosophical argument. Absolutely fascinating. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.